As the episode begins, we get a glimpse into the life of Jun, a handsome and charming K-pop artist who has millions of fans worldwide. Despite his massive success, Jun's journey to stardom was not an easy one, as he had to work tirelessly to rise from a trainee to the pinnacle of his career. As we delve deeper into Jun's life, we learn that he is under contract with a reputable agency known as Shooting Star. While he has immense fame and success at present, he has paid a high price for it in the past because he had to part ways with his first love and best friend. On his birthday, Jun is supposed to perform, and many of his fans are seen ecstatically waiting by the entrance outside the venue. Just then, he receives flowers and a card wishing him a happy birthday from someone going by JJ. After a while, he tries to call his mom, but gets no answer from her. We are then introduced to Jinyoung, a hardworking reporter working for a magazine company called Wonder Woman. She has always worked hard, but has never been able to get ahead. She is also naive and easily taken advantage of by her boss and co-workers, who make her do all the work and then take credit for her great ideas. Moreover, her strong work ethic is never rewarded, yet she is fiercely independent and determined to succeed. After work that day, Roy, Jinyoung's boyfriend and a well-known celebrity chef, invites her to his home. On her way to his apartment, a man in pink pants runs into her as she makes her way up the stairs, causing both of them to drop their bouquets. He quickly grabs her bouquet though and goes, leaving Jinyoung with little choice but to take the second bouquet. Just as she enters the corridor, she sees Roy kissing the same man passionately, breaking her heart. Next, we are introduced to Jae-jun, also known as JJ, who's the CEO of an entertainment agency known as Spygen Entertainment. As he's about to head home for the day, he notices his employees listening to Jun's songs and praising him, which infuriates him. Later, JJ is seen having a romantic dinner with Oh Eun-hyun, his longtime partner, who is also a client of his agency. During the dinner, he watches Jun's live broadcast and discovers that he has won the title of Most Loved Artist worldwide. He then becomes frustrated, and even when Eun-hyun tries to talk about the release of her record, he completely ignores what she has to say. 6 months later, JJ sends the Wonder Woman magazine company an invitation to his nightclub's opening ceremony, so Jinyoung and her friend Soo-hwan are sent to cover the event in case there is any newsworthy information. In the meantime, Jun also receives the invitation and recalls his days as a trainee with JJ and Eun-hyun. The following evening, as Jinyoung arrives at the club with her friend, she notices the car belonging to Jun's agency and approaches it. Then, as she tries to peer into the car through the tinted window, the door unexpectedly opens, causing her to almost fall, but Jun steps out and holds her. Later, JJ gives a speech and welcomes the reporters to his club, but they instantly turn their focus to Jun after spotting him arrive. After a while, he runs into Eun-hyun, who discreetly pulls him aside for a conversation. Jinyoung, who has drunk a lot of wine and is feeling sick, heads upstairs to use the restroom. There, she surprisingly notices Jun hitting Eun-hyun. He also spots her across the room and recognizes Jinyoung from the previous encounter. Jun confronts her angrily and concludes that she is paparazzi. Jinyoung claims that she didn't take any photos, but Jun becomes enraged and takes the camera away from her, shattering it on the ground. Sadly, Jinyoung, already feeling sick, pukes on his shoes, which enrages Jun even more. Moreover, he doesn't accept her apologies, so she accuses him of being a fake because his actions are totally at odds with how he portrays himself in the media. Outside the club, Jinyoung pursues Jun, asking him to apologize for his insults, but he refuses and walks away. Outraged, she snatches one of her heels and throws it at him. Funnily enough, a crowd of people waiting outside the club sees the heel hit him on the head, and the word of this incident soon spreads. The following morning, Jun's manager Ji-hyung asks him about what Jinyoung witnessed, and he admits that she saw him with Eun-hyun, unaware that she also witnessed him attacking her. On the other hand, JJ, who was present during this whole thing, finds the scandal of angry heels amusing. He then brings out the heel, revealing that he brought it along for unknown reasons. Elsewhere, Jinyoung is fired from her company for getting involved in the controversy. Later that day, Eun-hyun and her manager go to another agency, but the director doesn't seem interested. Then as soon as he sees Jun and Ji-hyung, he ignores Eun-hyun and offers them a project proposal instead. As Jun notices Eun-hyun, he reminisces about the time when they were dating. He then approaches her before requesting that the director think about representing Eun-hyun through the agency. Later that night, Eun-hyun texts Jun at his other private number to express her gratitude, revealing that they stay in touch via this secret number. In the meantime, Jinyoung arrives home to discover overdue bills, so she heads to her best friend Mi-jung's house to stay a while. She also assumes that Jun must be the mastermind behind her dismissal. Desperate for revenge, she writes an email exposing the dark side of him and sends it to some media outlets. Following the email, a reporter named Choi Hee-gun calls Jinyoung and requests an interview on the incident. She meets him and makes an effort to explain precisely what occurred that fateful evening. The next day, as Jun proceeds towards a cafe, he overhears two girls discussing Eun-hyun as a gold digger. Enraged, he walks over to them and criticizes them for defaming people without understanding the complete context before walking away. However, this only leads to the CEO of Jun's agency, Mr. Bae, getting angry and having an argument with Jun. He then coldly reminds June of how he gave him his big break in the entertainment industry and warns him not to mess things up. In the meantime, the reporter writes an article about Jinyoung's interview, but June's fans are unhappy with it. Jinyoung unfortunately endures a lot of backlash because no one believes her version of events, with the majority of them accusing her of lying in order to gain notoriety. She strikes back by posting crazy comments about June online after receiving such criticism from his fans. The word quickly spreads in the entertainment world, and she soon gains a notorious reputation as June's ultimate anti-fan. Therefore, she holds a one-person protest in front of June's talent agency. As soon as his fans notice this, they start physically assaulting her for spreading false information about their idol. Fortunately, June arrives just in time and breaks up the brawl before claiming that Jinyoung only hates him because of a misunderstanding. After giving her a warm embrace, he then departs. Soon, JJ spots Jinyoung wandering by herself and approaches her for a chat. The two then talk about June's deceitfulness in real life, which is completely different from what he portrays on TV. Eventually, Jinyoung's picketing garners some media attention and the anti-fan label. So, capitalizing on this hot debacle, Mr. Han, an opportunistic reality TV producer and director, offers her a chance to appear on a reality TV show. The producer makes the same offer to Mr. Bae as well, who then presents it to June. However, he doesn't appear too eager to take part in the show, since he hopes to steer clear of the woman again after their highly publicized encounter. Following this, Mr. Han schedules a meeting with Jinyoung to discuss the show, So I Married an Anti-Fan. The show's premise is that the celebrity must coexist with his or her worst hater, but Jinyoung declines this offer as soon as she learns that she will be paired with June. However, being in a tough financial situation and running low on funds, she reluctantly agrees to participate in the show. On the other hand, June's popularity with the public seems to have taken a hit. He accepts this offer in hopes of restoring his reputation and regaining lost public affection, only to decline it again later. So, Jinyoung attends an event where he is supposed to make an appearance. She then confronts and pleads with him to appear on the show with her, but he coldly declines and walks away. As June is about to leave though, JJ stops him and asks about the claims that Jinyoung rejected the offer. Then, in order to give In-hyung her long overdue fame, he suggests June cast her as the anti-fan. However, having dated In-hyung in the past, June only seems to be bothered by this idea. Therefore, he informs the manager that he will accept the offer, but that the anti-fan must be Jinyoung in order to truly get rid of her. The following morning, Mr. Han calls the two of them to the agency, introduces them to Miss No, the show's writer, and gives them a second in-person briefing on the project. Later, they proceed to the location of the shooting, which turns out to be June's penthouse. After they tour the house, his manager Ji-hung asks Jinyoung for her number and also gives her his business card because she doesn't have a manager. He then requests that she get in touch with them if anything changes, which only appears to aggravate June. Later that evening, Jinyoung goes to Mi-jung's house and remembers that her boyfriend is moving in. However, when Jinyoung finds that the two of them are sleeping uncomfortably, she quietly packs her luggage and leaves the same night. Unfortunately, when she gets to her apartment, she discovers that her mother has terminated the lease. So she comes to the conclusion that moving into the penthouse is the best option. Surprisingly, June walks into the apartment at the same time, and in her feeble attempt to hide, the two quickly come face to face. Even after witnessing Jinyoung in his apartment, June seems calm and composed, which surprises her. Just then, he notices her backpack and luggage, so Jinyoung confesses that she will be staying in the penthouse for a while. The two end up drinking together as they bicker about whether or not she is allowed to stay. The next morning, June finds himself sleeping on the couch, but doesn't give it much thought. However, when he enters the bathroom, he finds Jinyoung lying in the bathtub. This startles him, and he cautiously checks to see if she's breathing. Jinyoung instantly wakes up, and he inquires why she is still there. To his surprise, Jinyoung confesses that it was June who had asked her to stay when she was about to leave. Following this, he offers to let her remain in the penthouse, but only if she makes a promise to keep it a secret. After reaching an agreement, June heads to the gym. There, he notices In-hyung working on a fitness show, and they somehow cross paths during her break. Later, JJ confesses to having seen them together, but In-hyung doesn't tell him anything about it, which results in the two getting into an argument. The next evening, Jinyoung goes out to drink with Mr. Han, Ms. No, and June. Hours pass, and everyone gets drunk, including Jinyoung, who goes to the bathroom alone. JJ also finds himself in the same restaurant and notices her walking alone. He then approaches her and starts chatting. Just then, June catches them together and advises Jinyoung to go home as she's drunk. Hearing this, JJ sarcastically remarks on his concern for Jinyoung before leaving. Later that night, June takes her home in a cab, but Jinyoung gets wasted, forcing him to carry her on his back. As they get to the penthouse, he asks her how she knows JJ, but she falls asleep as soon as she lies down on the couch. Then we see his soft side as he takes a blanket and puts it over her. Before leaving, he looks at Jinyoung, who is sleeping peacefully, and smiles as he recalls the evening they just spent together. The next day, Jinyoung grabs a meal and heads to the penthouse, but she is surprised when she finds all the crew members gathered for the shoot. She then walks in and checks her phone, only to discover that Miss No had texted her about it hours earlier. They then rush her to makeup and put her in a bridal gown for their wedding photo shoot. Afterwards, Mr. Han says that the next shoot will feature them going for a drive together, with Jinyoung driving the car. Before the filming, Ji-young finds Jinyoung looking concerned and asks if she's okay, assuring her that she has the right to refuse to do any scene if she doesn't feel comfortable. The latter says that she's fine, and so the filming begins. Unfortunately, Jinyoung speeds at an elevated pace and loses control. Just as they're going to collide with the crew members ahead, June takes control of the situation by pulling the handbrake, leading them to accidentally kiss. Later that evening, Jinyoung begins writing about June's two-faced attitude to ease her annoyance with him and the stress of the shoot. But suddenly, the crew members return to the house for another camera setup, so she immediately hides on the balcony. Unfortunately, she ends up locking herself out of the house and has no one to turn to for help. She recalls Ji-young asking her to contact him if necessary, so she calls his number. Meanwhile, Ji-young is in the middle of an interview with June, but his phone rings just as he's about to walk out of the room for something. So, June answers the phone, but before he could speak, Jinyoung urges him to hurry back home and help her. The next day, Mr. Han requests that Jinyoung bring her belongings to the penthouse so that they can film a scene of her moving in with June and spending their day together at home. Afterwards, she tries to explore the second floor of the house, but June grabs her and warns her to stay away from there. Upset, June goes for a walk, but her day only worsens as an army of June's fans tosses eggs and flour at her for defaming their idol. Meanwhile, Mr. Bae offers an advertisement for June, but he hesitates to go since his partner would be In-hyung. Later that day, the shooting at the penthouse resumes, but June appears to have sprained his ankle. So he uses this as an excuse to make Jinyoung do all the work while he bosses her around. Later, Mr. Han asks her to walk in with a cake and beverages, but before she begins, she spikes June's drink with some expired vitamin powder. As the scene progresses, June begins to feel sick, and everyone in the room panics. Hence, a worried Jinyoung frantically admits to having spiked his drink. Later that same evening, Jinyoung regrets her behavior and asks Ji-young to drop her off at June's house so she can apologize. Around the same time, In-hyung visits June, and he recalls how they met on the opening night of JJ's club. It is revealed here that he did not actually hit her or make her cry, despite how it appeared from a distance. Jinyoung then notices In-hyung leaving and she calls her out, but June holds her and turns her around, forcing the two to face away from one another. The next day, June invites Jinyoung to a restaurant, which turns out to be her ex-boyfriend Roy's. However, when they meet, they pretend to be strangers. After the shoot, June tries to joke around and banter with Jinyoung, but she gets upset and storms out of the restaurant, leaving her heels in front of the entrance. Meanwhile, In-hyung invites JJ to a romantic dinner at the same restaurant and assures him that she and June are no longer in any relationship and simply met by chance. But their dinner is cut short by yet another conflict. Just then, June overhears them arguing and tries to stop them, but his presence only complicates the situation. After the couple leaves, an angry June hits the wall hard, bruising his knuckles. He returns to the penthouse, and Jinyoung tenderly puts a bandage on his wounds. The following morning, as June is examining his late father's ring, he remembers how Ji-young had met his father's acquaintance in Japan. Upset, he tries to contact his mother again, but as usual, she doesn't pick up, so he just leaves a voicemail. Later that day, Jinyoung makes her way to the second floor, pretending to use the restroom, but June again stops her. That evening, she adds new information to her file on Two-Faced June, claiming that he enjoys attention, but when he gets angry, he completely disregards what others say. One day, Jinyoung receives an early morning call from Mr. Kong, the editor-in-chief of the newspaper, Super Patch. He says he wants to recruit her for a high-paying position, but she contemplates accepting the offer as she has endured so much backlash from the public due to June and the show. The next morning, they prepare to head to the airport to leave for their next shoot in Japan. But suddenly, Ji-young receives a call from the director about Jinyoung not answering her phone. He then informs June of this, who suggests that she may be in the penthouse, but they are unable to find her. Meanwhile, Jinyoung is in the middle of an interview at the Super Patch, and Mr. Kong encourages her to investigate more about June's dark side, which he keeps hidden from the camera. Furthermore, he proclaims that he will hire her if she delivers to them potentially valuable information regarding June. Mr. Kong then gives her a contract, but Jinyoung, to his astonishment, declines the offer and heads to the airport. When June hears that she has arrived at the airport, he rushes to find her, and the two make it on the next flight to Japan. He then asks about her delay, but she doesn't tell him about the interview at Super Patch, and instead lies. Once they arrive in Japan, Mr. Han informs him that their next scene will entail Jinyoung guiding June around the town. Meanwhile, JJ is enraged at his employees after learning that In-hyung is also headed to Japan for the advertisement gig, with June as her partner. After the shoot, Ji-young brings June to the ad agency in Japan to meet the advertiser. It turns out that In-young has already arrived there. They are then informed that the advertiser would like to have an informal dinner with only June and In-hyung. During the dinner, as the three of them are talking, JJ suddenly barges in. He grabs In-hyung's hand and leads her out, and they get into another dispute as JJ believes she took the deal to get closer to June. Meanwhile, Ji-young and Jinyoung go out for ramen, and she learns more about June's compassionate side. She then remembers June coming to find her at the airport and helping her with her luggage. The following day, June and In-hyung get to the beach for the shoot, as do JJ and Jinyoung. While the two models are filming, both Jinyoung and JJ try to sit there, repressing their jealousy at seeing the other two together. After a while, the reality show shoot begins, and Jinyoung and June are told to have fun on the beach. The next day, June brings Jinyoung food, and we notice him growing softer and more compassionate towards her. But just as she's finishing her meal, JJ pays her a visit with flowers and food too. He then approaches June and offers him a contract with his agency, but the latter swiftly rejects it. Later that day, Ji-young accompanies June to meet with his father's acquaintance in order to learn more about the ring. The man then informs him that he and his high school friends acquired matching rings, but when asked about the inscription that says Yama, he replies that he has no idea what it means. All this while, JJ is secretly following the two to try to uncover who June is looking for. Later, June returns to the hotel but unknowingly drops the ring in the elevator, which Jinyoung ends up finding. He then calls his mother again, but she does not respond, leaving him even more perplexed about the ring and his parents' relationship. During their trip the next morning, Jinyoung mentions to Ji-young that she left a ring that she found in the hotel lobby. When they arrive at Seoul's airport, a crowd of reporters and fans gather around them, and someone pushes Jinyoung as they are about to walk away. Along with this, rumors circulate that she agreed to do the show solely to seek revenge on June. Meanwhile, her mother calls her, concerned about the extent to which she's been condemned in the media, and asks her to drop everything and come home. Later, as the first episode airs, Jinyoung reads every article on the show and finds that the public is absolutely outraged over her plotting revenge. Hence, June delivers everything to her that she needs at home so that she doesn't have to go out. The next morning, Mr. Han invites them to walk around Seoul's streets, but Jinyoung feels uneasy about being so exposed. So June tenderly comforts her, assuring her that he will keep her safe. Later, the news of their shoot spreads and June's fans wait for them as they head down the street. During their filming, the two buy matching necklaces as an early birthday present for her, and June even sings a song, which makes his fans go crazy. Following this, June's fans approach him, but he holds Jinyoung's hand, and the two run away from the crowd and seek refuge on the street. Suddenly it begins to rain, so June pulls out his jacket, wraps it around himself and Jinyoung as an umbrella, and they run in the rain together. Meanwhile, In-young sees the two together and becomes devastated, reminiscing about the moment June shielded her from the rain. The following day, their shoot is expected to occur at Club Benny, JJ's nightclub, where Jinyoung and June met for the first time. As she arrives, Miss No informs her that Ju got into a car accident on his way to the club, causing her a great deal of worry. But to her surprise, June, Ji-young, and the entire production crew pull a prank on her by throwing her a birthday surprise. Meanwhile, JJ and In-young also arrive at the club, and the four of them get to talking. Out of nowhere, JJ suggests that Jinyoung make her official debut as a TV personality. This leaves In-young uneasy, as she spent all these years with JJ's agency, but he has made no effort for her debut. After that, he asks Jinyoung privately if she saw In-young with June on the opening night, but before she can respond, June notices them together and storms out in a rage, believing that she is spreading fabricated stories about it. Later that evening, JJ confronts June and accuses him of having a secret relationship with In-young. Things only get worse from here, as the two end up physically fighting. June then returns home to see Jinyoung packing her belongings to go. However, he asks her to stay, promising not to cause any trouble from now on. In the next scene, JJ invites Jinyoung to his office and apologizes for the previous day. The latter accepts and then questions him about the history of the three of them. JJ reveals that he, June, and In-young used to be very close, but June abandoned them after his debut and became very arrogant. Right then, In-hyung arrives at the scene, but when she sees JJ and Jinyoung together, she quietly leaves, disappointed. That night, June calls Jinyoung and asks her to accompany him while he waits in line to buy a game that will be released 10 hours later. However, in the midst of the wait, he has to leave urgently due to his schedule. This leaves Jinyoung alone, but she stays in line obediently. Elsewhere, as June is finishing up his song, he receives a call from the reporter Hee-goon, who informs him that Ji-young did an interview with a super patch. They've actually hired her in exchange for information about June. Hearing this, our poor protagonist feels betrayed and recalls all the times Jinyoung was kind and caring to him, as well as the sweet moments they shared up until that point. As a result, he becomes enraged and quits the show, even asking Jinyoung to have the directors cancel the show entirely. Later, Jinyoung is called in for a clothing brand event where she is told to do a photo shoot. However, she hesitates as she always ends up getting attacked by the fans as well as the reporters. Just as she predicted, a bunch of reporters attack her, forcing her team to escort her out of the event. Later that evening, Hee-gyun approaches Jun and apologizes for the misinformation he provided earlier. He adds that while Jinyoung did in fact go for the interview, she turned them down to their faces when they asked her to fish for information about Jun. Hearing this, Jun immediately rushes to the penthouse with a pair of beautiful heels as an apology, as well as her real birthday present. Then he tries to comfort her, but she breaks down in tears and pours her heart out about how hurt she's been through all of this. Jun admits that he regrets his actions and gets concerned and worried for her. One thing leads to another and they end up kissing. However, she later thinks that he's merely toying with her heart and assumes he kissed her as a joke. Meanwhile, JJ's agency prepares to hold an audition for rookie trainees to debut. But In-hyun gets left out as they only allow trainees who have never been on TV. Even when she tries to talk to JJ about this, he brings up her advertisement in Japan and simply asks her to let another rookie trainee debut this time. Enraged, In-hyun goes to record the female part of Jun's new song without letting JJ or the agency know about it. Later, JJ gets a call regarding the ring and the man Jun was looking for. He learns that it was one of the matching rings that a group of high school friends made 27 years ago. On the other hand, Jun agrees to resume production, and the next filming location is none other than Jinyoung's previous workplace. The CEO of the company, Miss Moon-hee, presents a project proposal to Jun, and when Jinyoung sees it, she immediately recognizes it as the proposal she wrote while she was working there. When they ask Jun's opinion, he states that Jinyoung's opinions matter to him, and so he turns to her. As expected, she firmly declines the proposal, stating it's rubbish. In the next scene, Jinyoung gets a call from JJ, so she pays him a visit at his office, where she vents about the day's shoot. Just then, she notices a photo of the ring she found at the hotel in Japan and asks him about it. JJ lies to her, claiming that it's his, and the naive Jinyoung mentions that she left it in the lobby. Meanwhile, Jun comes to the penthouse to visit Jinyoung, but doesn't find her there. She doesn't even pick up his calls, but later she finds him waiting at her friend's place along with Soo-hwan and Mi-jung. The four of them hang out, and after spending a day with Jun, Jinyoung's friends change their mind about him. They have realized that he's not a rude person after all. The next day when Jinyoung gets home, one of Jun's diehard fans, Yuri, stalks her and enters the house when she unlocks the door. Then she blackmails her, saying she'll expose the fact that Jinyoung lives here if she doesn't let her see Jun. Our cute protagonist politely asks the kid to go home and come back tomorrow, but Yuri reveals that she ran away from home. Hence, left with no options, Jinyoung reluctantly lets her stay. The following day, Jinyoung shows up at Jun's shoot for a talk show. As soon as Jun notices that she's wearing the same heels that he gifted her, he gets very happy and excited. Meanwhile, JJ is told by his employees about Jun's new single and In-hyun singing the female part in the song, which infuriates him. He then plays the same song while in the car with her, but she doesn't say a word. Poor JJ cries about her betrayal, but In-hyun just claims that she had no idea that it was Jun's song. He then takes her to the talk show and confronts Jun about it, but the latter claims that nothing has been decided yet. Moments later, the talk show starts and the interviewer asks Jun several casual questions about his professional life. She also causes controversy when she inquires about his first love. Immediately after hearing this question, In-hyun leaves the room, JJ follows her, and the two end up having yet another argument. Later, Jun comes to the penthouse to find his fan Yuri waiting for him. So, the first thing he does the next morning is take Yuri on a drive along with Jinyoung and drop her home. He then asks Jinyoung about her hometown, and as she falls asleep in the car, he drives her to Dongjin. Unfortunately, when her parents see Jun for the first time, they don't hide the fact that they dislike him and start beating him up for making their daughter suffer. However, they eventually come around and warm up to him. That night, Jinyoung accompanies Jun in the garden, and he finally shares the truth about his past. He admits that his agency fabricated his entire past to make him seem more special. In reality, he's just a normal guy whose parents abandoned him long ago. Moments later, Jun confesses that he likes her, and they passionately kiss again. After coming back to Seoul, Jun asks Ji-young to contact the hotel for the ring, as well as his father's alumni group, to get more information. As time passes, they appear to be more comfortable in each other's company and seem to care a lot about each other. Moreover, they are seen blushing and getting flustered when they are around each other, or even when they're texting. Meanwhile, In-hyun is again seen recording a duet for Jun. When the producer steps out for a moment, she takes this chance to steal the song from the computer. She then sends the agency a notice of contract cancellation as she leaks the duet song. As usual, word spreads around the industry and numerous articles start popping up, blaming Jinyoung, the anti-fan, for the leak and claiming it was part of her revenge. Meanwhile, In-hyung sits in her apartment reading each one of those articles, with every one of them associating June and Jinyoung. JJ then visits her and boldly asks if she leaked the song. In-hyung admits it without any hesitation. This leads the two to yet another argument, but things go a bit too far this time, and In-hyung states that she regrets being with him. Outraged, JJ slaps her across the face, and in response, In-hyung storms out of the apartment. While sitting in her car, she takes one too many anxiety pills, and later, the cops find her in an unconscious state. On the other hand, Jinyoung also has a breakdown, and June finds her at Mi-jung's place. He then takes her out to a beach where they're alone in the open air and tries to comfort her. Following this, June apologizes for putting her through this and tries to cheer her up by advising her to shout her troubles out in the open, which seems to make her laugh. Then, just before leaving, he pulls her into a warm and gentle embrace. Their romantic moment is cut short, however, when the hospital calls June on his secret number. He is then informed about In-hyung's situation, so the two of them rush to the hospital. When she finally wakes up, June frantically inquires what led her to this situation, but she doesn't really say much and only expresses her surprise to see him with Jinyoung. After a while, Jinyoung arrives at the hospital to take June home, but he refuses to go since In-hyung will be alone. Hearing this, Jinyoung steps forward and offers to stay with her instead. Later, she finds out that it was In-hyung who leaked the song and gets enraged. However, after a while, the two eventually become friends. Meanwhile, Mr. Bae believes that Jinyoung leaked the song, despite Ji-hong's numerous attempts to reassure him that she didn't. On the other hand, June pays In-hyung a visit at the hospital, and she confesses to having leaked the song to gain some recognition, shocking him. Just as they're talking, JJ arrives at the scene, and Jinyoung tries to stop him from entering the room. But he walks in anyway and sees June and In-hyung together, creating yet another rift between him and his girlfriend. Fortunately, before he can cause a scene, Ji-young enters the room and reveals that some reporters are waiting in the lobby after hearing that June is here. So they discreetly send In-hyung out of the hospital, while Jinyoung stays as a patient. Ji-young then heads out to tell the reporters that she was highly stressed due to the misunderstanding about the song being leaked, to the point that she had been hospitalized. Ji-young also makes it clear to the reporters that Jinyoung was not responsible for leaking the song. Hearing this, all of them visit her and apologize for the criticism she has received lately. The same evening, June sneaks Jinyoung out of the hospital and takes her to the penthouse. He then leads her to the second floor of the house, something that he has never allowed her to do before. Jinyoung stands in awe as she takes in a tour of the room, filled with June's hobbies and interests. Finally, he reveals that the reason he stayed with Mr. Bae was because he saw the CEO invest everything in him, and he couldn't simply leave him just as he was about to get a big break. The next morning, Ji-hong calls Jinyoung as he cannot seem to find June anywhere. Unfortunately, they realize he was abducted on his way home the night before, which leaves both of them worried. After a whole day of trying to find clues on their own, they finally discover that it was one of June's own fans who abducted him to help him with something. Then, the scene cuts to a mall where June sings for the fan couple while the man proposes to his girlfriend. Later that evening, June comes to pick Jinyoung up and takes her to a beautiful place near the lake. The two then watch the latest episode of their show and see that Mr. Han included their accidental kiss as well, leaving Jinyoung upset that she'll be criticized over this again. And just as anticipated, June's fans get mad at her for acting as the anti-fan to get closer to him. The next day, JJ goes to a law firm for legal advice regarding In-hyung's contract cancellation and meets the CEO, Mr. Chow Hae-yoon. They tell him that the clauses on the termination were not worded strongly, so while In-hyung has to pay a penalty, the case won't go well if she takes this to court. They also advise him not to sue her as she only has a year left on the contract. Meanwhile, Mr. Bae asks June about the female singer in his song, but he doesn't reveal that it's In-hyung, and only says that she's an indie singer. Upon hearing this, Mr. Bae asks Ji-hyung to release the song as soon as he can. Meanwhile, In-hyung visits the company that produced June's show, and it's revealed that despite her being with JJ's agency, he didn't include her on the audition list for her debut. Ms. No then advises the director to include her as well, since she used to train with June. Later, Ji-young informs June that someone else retrieved the ring, but he couldn't contact the person who took it. They're unaware of the fact that it was actually JJ who hired someone else to spy on them and retrieve the ring. Afterwards, June goes to the penthouse to visit Jinyoung and surprises her by calling her friends over for dinner. During this, Mi-jung realizes that Jinyoung likes June and encourages her to propose to him. The next day, Ji-young sets up a meeting with Jinyoung to discuss the ads and tells her that the two of them will be making an appearance together. He also offers to help her process the contract since she's working alone. As expected, Jinyoung gets worried that she'll be criticized by the public again, but June, who is also there, gently reassures her that it's his responsibility to prevent any such thing from happening. Meanwhile, In-hyung shows up for the audition and claims that she's not currently signed with any agencies. She says this right in front of JJ, which infuriates him. Afterwards, the two argue again, and Jinyoung boldly asks him if he's scared that she'll get famous while he remains stagnant in his current position. Surprisingly, JJ is left speechless, and he doesn't respond at all. Later that day, as June and Jinyoung head home, she inquires about the meaning of Yama, and he tells her that it was engraved in his father's ring. He then reveals that the ring was the one she found in the hotel in Japan, but when he went back to get it, someone else had already taken it. This is when Jinyoung realizes that JJ lied to her about the ring and suspects that he's the one who took it from the hotel. So the same day she pays JJ a visit and asks to see the ring. To Jinyoung's shock, she notices the word Yama engraved on it. She then angrily confronts him about the theft before storming out of his office. After a while, Jinyoung reaches the penthouse and gives the ring to June. But unbeknownst to them, JJ has followed Jinyoung there, and he knows that they are secretly dating. Meanwhile, many articles start coming out about In-hyun being a former trainee at June's agency. As soon as JJ learns this, he gets furious and calls Mr. Bae, but they only end up blaming one another. Outraged, Mr. Bae also calls June and scolds him, as In-hyun's association with June can damage his reputation. However, June simply tells him to lie to the media that he gave In-hyun that song on his own. To make things more controversial, In-hyun gives an interview regarding her days as a trainee and her relationship with June. Later that evening, JJ meets with Mr. Bae and offers to merge the two agencies together in order to put an end to the controversy surrounding June and In-hyun's relationship. However, Mr. Bae advises him to stop the pettiness and save himself from the humiliation. But just as he's about to leave, JJ stops him and hints that he has much more information than this. So he heads over to the penthouse to meet Jinyoung, belittles her and criticizes her relationship with June. JJ then warns that a love scandal could bring June's reputation down, and thus coldly tells her to steer clear of him and move out of the house. The next day, Mr. Bae orders the directors to cancel the show as he believes this will keep June and Jinyoung apart and avoid a love scandal. Upon hearing this, an enraged June calls Mr. Bae and requests that the show at least have an ending, and the CEO reluctantly agrees. However, he orders a guy to spy on June and report back on every single thing he does. Mr. Bae claims he's doing this all to save June's reputation from being tainted. Later, June records a video message from another room thanking Jinyoung and cherishing the moments they spent together. He then comes out with a bouquet of flowers and thanks her in person, leaving Jinyoung in tears with his sweet gesture. Once they start filming the last episode, everyone on set notes that the two appear happier, more loving, and more comfortable with each other, like a real couple. When the shoot comes to an end, June passionately kisses Jinyoung, assuring her that it's just the beginning. Elsewhere, as JJ is meeting with the legal firm's CEO, Mr. Hae-yoon, discussing possible ways to terminate In-hyun's contract, he suddenly notices the same Roman numerals, the one on June's ring, on the lawyer's desk. Shocked, he immediately orders someone to get a picture of the ring owner, dig up more information about the CEO, and find out who June is really looking for. Later, JJ calls June over to his place and suggests that he return to the Shooting Star agency, but the latter declines. Therefore, JJ resorts to blackmailing him, promising that he'll defile his entire life, or worse, the life of the one he loves. Moreover, he openly states that he'll hurt Jinyoung and suggests that June talk to Mr. Bae. This is when our protagonist figures out that Mr. Bae only canceled the show to get rid of Jinyoung from his life. One evening, Mr. Kong from Super Patch calls Jinyoung, offering her an internship after learning about the show coming to an end, and she accepts. However, on the second day of work, the agency rummages through her laptop and, without her knowledge, leaks the two-faced June file that she had written when she hated him. Soon enough, the media outlets catch wind of the file, exposing June's duplicity and violent relationship with women. When Mr. Bae finds out about this, he accuses Jinyoung of purposely betraying June to gain popularity. Our lovely protagonist is just as shocked as everyone is, so she doesn't say anything in her defense. Following this, Jinyoung leaves her house to meet June, but sees JJ waiting outside. He mentions that June is not home, so he drops her off at the penthouse. Unfortunately, the timing couldn't be worse as she meets Mr. Bae right at the door. Despite her efforts to explain the misunderstanding, he simply asked her to give June some time to patch up the mess. Then the very next day, the agency releases an official statement blaming Jinyoung. This infuriates June and he lashes out at Mr. Bae for blaming his girlfriend without knowing the truth. At last, he terminates his contract and leaves the agency for good. Furthermore, Jinyoung resigns from his job at the agency, and the two then publish an article with the help of Hee-goon, stating that Jinyoung wasn't the one who disclosed the file. To their dismay, someone anonymously exposes his entire fabricated past, and the public gets enraged over the fact that In-hyun was June's first love, whom he abandoned over success. Following this, poor June struggles to be optimistic, so much so that he even asks Jinyoung for some time and refrains from talking to her. Meanwhile, JJ discovers from his spy that the person who owns the ring and Mr. Chow Hae-yoon, the lawyer he met from the other day, are in fact the same person. He also receives a photo of the lawyer and learns that June has been looking for his father. So JJ goes to the penthouse to visit June and gives him the lawyer's business card, revealing that it's his father. This leaves our protagonist in a complete state of shock. After a while, Mr. Bay calls June asking him to come back to the agency, and it's revealed that he was the one who published those anonymous articles. Later that evening, June holds an urgent press conference to apologize and confess the truth about his fabricated past. The next day, JJ is chastised by his family for failing to run the agency well. Hence, despite his pleas, he is stripped of his legal rights to the agency. At the same time, several articles ostracizing Jinyoung get published, causing the director to reject her from the audition program altogether. In this way, things take a turn for the worse for all four of them, deteriorating each of their lives and careers. That evening, Jinyoung approaches JJ in the street and breaks down completely as she confronts him for exposing her. But between all of this mess, she doesn't see him hurting either, so he says he'll disappear from her life. In a shocking turn of events, Jinyoung runs into oncoming traffic to end it all, and JJ rushes to save her. Unfortunately, both of them get into a serious accident and get hospitalized. Once June and Jinyoung hear about this, they rush to the hospital and learn that both of them are unconscious. Meanwhile, Jinyoung also reaches the hospital and calls June, but having a lot on his plate, he only asks her to give him some more time. The following morning, the aftermath of the press conference reveals itself, and everything comes crashing down for June. The public ostracizes him, his show gets canceled, and even his advertisers file a lawsuit against him. Meanwhile, In-hyung wakes up and feels guilty and devastated to hear that JJ is still unconscious. June also stays with JJ and breaks down as he reminisces about their time together. He then texts Jinyoung, asking her to meet him at the park in the evening. However, he later calls to cancel the plan, but she forgets her phone and thus doesn't pick up. Because of this, Jinyoung waits for him as it snows, catching a cold in the process. The next day, June visits his presumed father, Mr. Cho Hae-yoon, at his law firm regarding the lawsuit he's facing. Immediately upon meeting, Hae-yoon inquires about the ring, but June confronts him for abandoning him and his mother. It is then revealed that although the ring belonged to Hae-yoon, the one who gave it to June's mother was his best friend, Kim. He adds that Kim's family didn't allow the marriage, so he moved out and proposed to June's mother with his best friend Hae-yoon's ring. Moreover, he engraved the initials Yama before the proposal, which is finally revealed to mean, "You are my all." Additionally, June learns that once his mother discovered she was pregnant, she moved to Alaska and disappeared from his father's life. Finally, Hae-yoon reveals that Kim took his life 10 years ago. Then as June visits his late father at the cemetery, Hae-yoon calls his mother and informs her about the meeting. Hearing this, she calls him crying, and the two finally talk to each other after years of not being in contact. Later that day, June arrives at the hospital and the doctor reveals that JJ is awake, but has endured major trauma to his head, resulting in a temporary loss of speech. Meanwhile, Jinyoung goes to take English classes, and there she meets her ex-boss, Miss Moon-hee. The latter reveals that Jinyoung wasn't fired because of June, but rather due to the company downsizing its employees to keep it from going bankrupt. Moreover, Moon-hee admits to having stolen her proposals, so she fired her after feeling uncomfortable having her around. Reinvigorated by the revelation, Jinyoung, with the help of her friend, publishes an article where she defends June. In the evening, Jinyoung goes to the park alone and talks to the stars, thinking about June. Meanwhile, June visits her place but doesn't find her there. He also tries to call her, but she doesn't answer the phone. He then figures out that she's in the park and, as expected, finds Jinyoung crying alone. Then, without saying another word, he walks up to her, and the two hold each other in a loving embrace. Furthermore, June also tells her about the ring and his father before breaking down in tears. He then asks Jinyoung to give him a little more time and confesses his love to her. The following morning, several more anonymous articles are published accusing June of his apparent rude behavior, which causes him to face many more lawsuits. However, he isn't bothered by this at all anymore. June instead spends his time caring for JJ, such as feeding him, staying by his bed, and even occasionally taking him out for a stroll around the hospital in a wheelchair. Throughout this, JJ realizes how much June cares for him, despite not having been on the best of terms. The next day, June and Jinyoung reach out to Hae-yoon about the lawsuit, and he successfully helps them settle it. Apart from this, June also sells his house without looking back. After a while, he passes by his former agency and recalls the times Mr. Bae put his faith in him. It's revealed that Mr. Bae did a lot for him, from pleading with the former director to choose June, to buying him food and providing him pocket money when he was too broke. In the meantime, Jinyoung gets a call for an interview at a media company that she had sent her resume to. Later, Mr. Bae is informed about his agency going bankrupt as the investors retrieve their investments now that June is no longer signed. As he stands outside the shooting star agency building, he reminisces about all the hard work he put in to reach there, only for it to be sold off because of the debt. Suddenly, he gets a call informing him that his debt has been paid in full. It turns out that June sold his house and fully paid Mr. Bae's debt as a gesture of gratitude. Following this, June bids JJ and Jinyoung goodbye and informs him that he's leaving for somewhere. Although he doesn't reveal that he's traveling to Alaska, he does promise that he will return soon. The next day, Jinyoung leaves for the interview with Hee-gun. The two of them then try to salvage the misunderstanding and get back June's now lost reputation. Moreover, Jinyoung calls the fan who kidnapped him earlier and asks Hee-gun to interview him as well. Then she writes another public article about June, which garners a lot of praise from her boss and attention from the public. 3 months later, Jinyoung attends the producer and writer duo, Mr. Han and Miss No's wedding. At the end of the ceremony, June surprises everyone by suddenly showing up. Meanwhile, the first ever song that June had produced with the words written by JJ becomes a huge hit on the internet. It is then revealed that In-hyung now lives with JJ, taking care of him. One fine day, he suddenly gets back his ability to speak. This makes In-hyung overwhelmed with happiness, and for the first time, the once toxic couple is seen lovingly embracing each other. Finally, June regains his reputation back and becomes a top star again. Additionally, his duet with In-hyung regains popularity, giving her the long overdue fame she always deserved. Apart from this, his relationship with JJ also improves, and everything seemingly goes well for both of them. One day, In-hyung gets a call from a new record label that wants to work with her on a new album. However, she rejects the offer, stating that she doesn't want to sing yet. When JJ overhears this, he encourages her to accept, but she simply smiles and asks him to write the songs for her. In the meantime, things go well for Jinyoung and June's relationship as well. One morning, she's heading somewhere when suddenly someone approaches her and requests that she take their group photo. To her surprise, just as she is about to take the photo, the group turns around revealing the words, "Marry me, please." And to add to the surprise, June walks up to her with a bouquet and asks for her answer. The whole crowd surrounds him in awe as the top star, who June, proposes to his girlfriend. However, Jinyoung doesn't believe this and instead thinks he's pulling another prank on her. In response, June promises that he's being serious and puts a ring on her. Finally, he kisses her passionately as the crowd surrounding them cheers for the couple.